The arrow whistled past Kara's ear, missing her by millimeters before embedding itself into the trunk of an azure-barked tree. Blood trickled down her arm from a gash where one of their serrated stone blades had caught her. The metallic scent mingled with the alien forest's sweet, cloying aroma, a scent that had once made her gag, but now barely registered after 11 months stranded on this moon. "I know you're there, Earthborn!" The Tazari leader's voice carried through the foliage, his accent mangling the human language. "Your blood trail leads straight to you. Why run? Your kind always runs." Kara steadied her breathing, pressing her back against the rough trunk. Her pouch contained only 4 arrows, not enough for all the hunters. But her knife was sharp, and experience had taught her that Tazari, for all their hunting prowess, had vulnerabilities. "Do you remember what you said when you first landed on our world?" The voice continued. "You claim to come in peace, yet you bring only destruction. The prophecies were right about your kind." Her muscles tensed as she detected movement, a flash of blue against the indigo undergrowth. The hunting party was spreading out, trying to flank her. "The prophecies were manipulated," she called back, immediately changing position. "Your elders lied to you, Vrax. They knew what was in those ruins. They knew what would happen if—" A spear hurtled through the air where she had been standing. Kara rolled into a crouch, knocked an arrow, and loosed it in one fluid motion. A pained howl confirmed her hit. "That's 2 of your brothers I've wounded," she said, moving again. "Take them and go home. This doesn't have to end with more blood." A bitter laugh echoed through the forest. "It always ends in blood with your kind, Earthborn. Your species can't help itself." Kara's mind flashed to the crashed survey ship, and to the 5 crew members who had died on impact, to Marcus, who had survived for 3 months before succumbing to a local disease, to the initial peaceful contact with the Tazari that had turned hostile when they discovered the ancient ruins and the glyphs depicting beings from the stars bringing destruction. What the Tazari couldn't understand was that the ruins weren't a prophecy. They were a warning about something that had already happened thousands of years ago, something that threatened both humans and Tazari alike. "Last chance, Vrax," she called, stringing another arrow. "We need to work together. The transmission I managed to send, more humans will come, but not as enemies." The forest fell silent. Kara felt the change in air pressure a split second before the attack came. Vrax lunged from above, his powerful legs propelling him down from an overhanging branch. His stone knife glinted in the moonlight as it arced toward her throat. Kara's arrow caught him mid-leap, sinking into his shoulder. The impact altered his trajectory just enough that she was able to sidestep, though his blade sliced through her jacket and grazed her collarbone. They tumbled to the ground, rolling through phosphorescent moss that illuminated their struggle. Vrax was stronger, his dense muscle fibers and 4-jointed arms giving him a natural advantage. But Kara had learned to fight dirty, to use her smaller size and quicker reactions. She drove her elbow into the soft tissue beneath his jaw, one of the few vulnerable points in Tazari anatomy, and felt satisfaction as he wheezed and loosened his grip. She twisted free, scrambling backward and drawing her knife. "You fight well for prey," Vrax gasped, blue blood seeping from his wound. "Perhaps there is truth to the stories of human resilience." "We're not prey, and you're not the apex predator you think you are," Kara replied, circling him. "There are worse things on this moon than either of us, and they're what those ruins were warning about." Vrax's third eyelid flickered, a sign of agitation. More human lies. "The settlement your tribe abandoned 3 moons ago, it wasn't sickness that drove you away, was it? It was the shadow stalkers. They're getting bolder, moving closer to the mountains. I've tracked them." Vrax hesitated, his 4-fingered hand tightening on his knife. "How do you know of—" A distant, ululating cry cut through the night, a sound that made the hairs on Kara's neck stand on end. Both human and Tazari froze, instinctively recognizing the call of a predator. "That's less than a kilometer away," Kara whispered. "They're hunting early tonight." Fear flickered across Vrax's alien features. The shadow stalkers were the true apex predators, massive 6-limbed creatures with translucent skin that reflected their surroundings, making them nearly invisible in darkness. They hunted by sound and heat, and had developed a taste for both Tazari and human flesh. "The ruins," Kara said urgently. "They contain information about these creatures. Your ancestors knew how to defend against them. Mine might have too. There are human glyphs mixed with yours. Our people have been here before, thousands of years ago. Another cry closer this time was joined by a second. The hunting pack was moving in their direction. Vrax made a clicking sound with his throat, a Tazari expression of frustration. My brothers are wounded. They cannot move quickly. I know where we can go, Kara said. There's a cave system less than half a kilometer east. The entrance is narrow. The stalkers can't follow us there. Vrax's multifaceted eyes studied her. Why would you help us, Earthborn, after we hunted you? Because I'm tired of running, and I'm tired of fighting your people when we both have a common enemy. She held his gaze. And because, unlike what your elders taught you, humans understand alliance against greater threats. The decision visibly warred within him. Another cry, distinctly closer, made it for him. Lead, human, but know that my knife will find your heart if this is deception. Kara nodded. Fair enough. Let's get your brothers. The cave entrance was a narrow fissure that widened into a tunnel system carved by ancient water flows. Vrax's wounded brothers leaned heavily on him as they squeezed through the opening. Once inside, Kara struck her fire starter against flint, igniting a bundle of dried fungi that burned with a steady blue flame. The cave walls were covered in etched markings similar to those in the ruins. Vrax's eyes widened. These are old, older than the sacred texts. I've been working on translating them, Kara said, moving deeper into the cave where she had established a small camp. She retrieved a water skin and offered it to the wounded Tazari. It's clean. I boil it. The injured hunters exchanged glances with Vrax, who gave a subtle nod. They accepted cautiously. Why did your elders lie about humans? Kara asked as she prepared a poultice of crushed leaves. These markings show humans and Tazari working together, fighting side by side against the shadow stalkers. Vrax examined the wall carvings. Our histories speak of sky visitors who brought great destruction. They are called the Devourers in our oldest songs. But look at the markings, Kara insisted, pointing to a sequence of glyphs. These don't depict humans as devourers. They show another species altogether. See the difference in form? Humans and Tazari are shown here, fighting together against these other beings. She ran her fingers over a carving that clearly showed a human figure and a Tazari figure standing back to back, wielding weapons against a many-limbed creature. Vrax was silent for a long moment. Our elders teach that all sky visitors are the same, that any who come from above bring only death. A convenient teaching for maintaining isolation and control, Kara noted, applying the poultice to one of the wounded hunter's legs. My people have similar stories. Fears of outsiders used to maintain power structures. Outside, the cries of the shadow stalkers grew closer, then faded as the creatures moved past their location. Your weapons, Vrax said suddenly, gesturing to Kara's bow. They are simple, like ours. The Devourers in our histories wielded fire and light. Kara nodded. Our ship had more advanced technology, but it was destroyed in the crash. I've had to adapt. She touched the makeshift bow, crafted from a flexible azure wood and strung with fibers from a local plant. Humans are good at adapting, at surviving. This we have seen, Vrax acknowledged, touching his wounded shoulder. You alone have evaded our best hunters for many moons. Not just evaded, Kara corrected him. I've studied you, learned your language, your habits. I could have killed instead of wounded on many occasions. Vrax's third eyelid flickered again. Why didn't you? Because I believed what I said earlier. We're not meant to be enemies. She finished treating the wounded hunter. The shadow stalkers are getting bolder, moving into territories they previously avoided. Something's changing on this moon. The Great Dark approaches, one of the wounded hunters spoke up. It comes once every 7 cycles. The shadow stalkers always grow more numerous then. Kara frowned. What's the Great Dark? Vrax moved to the cave entrance, peering out at the night sky. When both moons align and shadow covers the land for 14 rotations, the old stories say it is when the barrier between worlds thins and the ancient enemies can more easily cross over. A chill ran down Kara's spine. When will this happen? The alignment begins in 3 days, Vrax replied. My tribe has already begun moving to the high caves for protection. It is why we sought to eliminate you before then. We could not risk a sky visitor during the Great Dark. Kara's mind raced. The ruins? They must contain information about this cycle, about how your ancestors and mine fought together during previous alignments. She turned to face Vrax directly. I need to get back to the ruins. The transmission I sent before you destroyed my communication equipment was incomplete. If more humans come, they need to understand what they're walking into. Vrax studied her for a long moment. The ruins lie in Shadowstalker territory now. It would be death to go there with the Great Dark approaching. It might be death for everyone if I don't, Kara countered. Your tribe's high caves might not be enough protection this time. The Stalker's territory has expanded significantly just in the months I've been here. Something is different about this cycle. The cave fell silent except for the soft hissing of the fungal fire. Finally, Vrax spoke again. Rest tonight, Earthborn. My brothers need healing. He touched the arrow still embedded in his shoulder. As do I. When light returns, we will speak more of this madness. Kara nodded and moved to help Vrax with his wound. As she worked to remove the arrow, she studied the alien being who had been hunting her for months. His blue skin was crisscrossed with ritual scars and decorated with pigments that enhanced his natural camouflage. Yet his eyes held an intelligence that reminded her that despite their differences, they were both sentient beings capable of reason. Why did you come to our world, Kara of Earth? Vrax asked quietly, using her name for the first time. Exploration, she answered honestly. My people seek knowledge of other worlds, other beings. We didn't know your kind existed here. Our scans showed only primitive life forms. Your machines could not detect us? Our technology has limitations. We thought this moon was uninhabited by intelligent life. She finished bandaging his wound. If we had known, we would have approached differently. Vrax made a sound that might have been skepticism. Yet you came armed. Precaution, not intention. Kara sat back. The universe is vast and often dangerous. We come prepared, but not seeking conflict. Your words ring with truth, Vrax conceded, though they contradict our teachings. Perhaps it's time to question those teachings, Kara suggested, especially if they were meant to hide the true history of our people's cooperation. Outside, the night grew quieter as the local life adjusted to the presence of the Shadowstalkers. Sleep, she told the Tazari. I'll keep watch for the first half of the night. To her surprise, Vrax nodded in agreement. It was a small gesture of trust, but significant. As the wounded hunters settled into uneasy slumber, Kara positioned herself near the cave entrance, knife in hand, thoughts turning to the ruins and what secrets they might still hold. Dawn broke with the peculiar lavender light that characterized mornings on Proxima's second moon. Kara had managed a few hours of sleep after Vrax had relieved her on watch. She awoke to find Vrax and his brothers already stirring. The wounded hunters looked better after a night's rest, though they moved gingerly. Your healing plants work well, Vrax acknowledged, examining his shoulder which showed signs of healing. The Tazari physiology responded quickly to treatment, another evolutionary advantage they possessed. I've had plenty of opportunity to experiment, Kara replied, gathering her belongings. This moon wants to kill you in 100 different ways. You either learn what helps and what hurts, or you die. Vrax watched her preparations. You still intend to reach the ruins. It wasn't a question, but Kara answered anyway. Yes, with or without your help. The Shadowstalkers will be less active in daylight, but still present. I'm aware. Kara checked her bow and remaining arrows. But I've survived this long. Vrax conferred briefly with his brothers in their native language. Finally, he turned back to her. I will guide you to the ruins, he announced. My brothers will return to our tribe and to report what we have learned and to prepare our people. If what you say about the Shadowstalkers' expansion is true, the high caves may not be sufficient protection this cycle. Kara hadn't expected this outcome. Why would you help me? Because your wounds to my brothers were precise, designed to stop, not to kill, because you offered healing when you could have left us to the Stalkers. Vrax's multifaceted eyes fixed on her. And because if you speak truth about the ruins, my people need to know. They exited the cave cautiously. The morning air was heavy with moisture, and the azure vegetation glistened with droplets, that Kara had learned were actually a mild digestive enzyme that plants use to break down small insects. Vrax's brothers departed after a brief ceremony that involved pressing foreheads together. "They honor you as a worthy adversary," he told Kara, as they watched the two hunters disappear into the forest. "I'd rather be honored as a worthy ally," she replied. "That remains to be proven," Vrax said, but with less hostility than before. They set off toward the ruins, moving in the efficient, silent manner of experienced hunters. Kara had learned to walk without disturbing the vegetation, to spot the signs of predator activity, and to identify the safest paths through the alien landscape. Vrax seemed surprised by her woodcraft. "You move like one born to the forest." "Necessity," Kara explained, pausing to examine a disturbed patch of soil. "Before I was a survey ship pilot, I was a wilderness survival instructor on Earth. Those skills translated better to this moon than my piloting abilities did." "What is this wilderness survival?" "Teaching others how to live in natural environments without modern technology, how to find food, water, shelter, how to navigate by stars and landmarks, how to avoid or confront dangerous wildlife." Vrax considered this. "Your people need teaching for this? It is not knowledge all possess? Most humans live in cities now, surrounded by technology. Natural survival skills aren't necessary for daily life. Some of us choose to learn them anyway, for emergency situations, or simply because we value the connection to our ancestral ways of living." "Strange to abandon such essential knowledge," Vrax mused. "All Tazari learn hunting, foraging, and survival from their first steps." They continued through the increasingly dense forest, where the trees grew closer together and the lighting changed. Less sunlight penetrated the canopy, creating a perpetual twilight that favored the shadow stalkers. "We enter their territory now, Erbagrum," Vrax warned, his voice barely audible. "Move only as I move. Step only where I step." Kara nodded, falling in behind him. The Tazari moved with incredible precision, testing each footfall and before committing his weight. They traversed a shallow stream, walking through the water for several hundred meters before exiting onto a rocky bank. "Water masks our scent and leaves no trail," Vrax explained. As they progressed deeper into stalker territory, Kara noticed changes in the environment. The phosphorescent moss grew in greater abundance, creating eerie patterns even in daylight. The trees showed scars of something large climbing or clawing them, and occasionally they passed the remnants of kills that even the scavengers seemed reluctant to consume. "The stalkers leave no waste," Vrax whispered as they paused to rest. "What they do not eat, few other creatures will touch." "Some kind of toxic residue?" Kara speculated. "Our shamans believe it is because the stalkers are not truly of this world, that what they leave behind is tainted with their otherworldly essence." Kara might have dismissed such talk as superstition before coming to this moon. Now, after months of observing the peculiar properties of the shadow stalkers, she wasn't so quick to judge. "How much farther to the ruins?" she asked. "We will reach them by nightfall," Vrax replied, "but we should not remain there after dark. I'll need time to study the glyphs, to complete the translation I started." Vrax's expression darkened. "One night then, no more. The great dark approaches, and when it comes, this entire region will belong to the stalkers." They resumed their journey, moving even more cautiously. Twice they froze as shadow stalkers passed nearby, massive undulating forms that Kara could barely perceive except by the distortion they created in the surrounding environment. The ruins came into view just as the planet's primary sun began to set. They rose from the forest floor like the skeleton of some enormous creature, stone structures reduced to their most fundamental elements by time and vegetation. "The Great Temple," Vrax said, indicating the largest structure at the center. "It is forbidden for my people to enter." "That's where the most important glyphs are," Kara told him, "the ones that show humans and Tazarifim fighting together." She led the way into the ruins, moving purposefully toward the central structure. The temple was a circular building with a partially collapsed dome roof. Massive columns supported what remained of the structure, each carved with spiraling glyphs. Inside, the fading sunlight filtered through gaps in the dome, creating shafts of dusty light that illuminated the central chamber. The walls were covered in elaborate carvings, scenes of battle, of ritual, of cooperation between species that looked remarkably like humans and Tazari. Here, Kara said, moving to a section of wall she had been working to translate. This tells the story of the Great Dark and what comes with it. Vrax approached cautiously, his cultural taboos visibly warring with his curiosity. These show the old ones, he said, pointing to figures that resembled the Shadow Stalkers but with subtle differences. But they are contained, controlled. Yes, Kara agreed excitedly. That's what I've been trying to understand. Your ancestors and mine found a way to control the Stalkers, to push them back during the Great Dark. But how? She ran her fingers over a series of glyphs that depicted humans and Tazari working together to construct something, a ring of stones with peculiar markings. This structure, she mused, it's not just ceremonial, it's functional somehow. Vrax pointed to another section of wall. These markings are similar to the sacred runes our shamans use during protection rituals. They are said to repel evil spirits. Or maybe repel creatures from another dimension, Kara suggested. The Stalker's ability to appear and disappear, their strange physical properties. What if they're not fully in our reality? What if the Great Dark allows them to cross over more completely? She moved to another panel of carvings that showed the dual moons aligned, creating a shadow over the land. Below this image was a depiction of the stone ring and illuminated with fire, creating a barrier that the stalker-like creatures could not cross. Some kind of energy field, she murmured, created by the specific arrangement of these marked stones, combined with fire, heat, some kind of resonance? As the light faded, Kara retrieved her fire starter and ignited another bundle of fungal material. The blue flame cast dancing shadows across the ancient carvings. We should establish a perimeter, Vrax said, eyeing the growing darkness outside. The Stalkers will be active soon. I need to copy these markings, Kara insisted. If we're going to recreate this protection circle, I need to get the symbols exactly right. Vrax hesitated, then nodded. I will secure the entrance. Work quickly, Earthborn. As Vrax moved to the temple entrance, Kara used a piece of charcoal to make rubbings of the most crucial glyphs on scraps of material salvaged from her ship. The work was painstaking, requiring precision and patience, but she forced herself to remain focused despite the growing sounds of activity outside. Vrax returned as Kara was completing her transcriptions. The Stalkers gather, he reported grimly, more than I have ever seen in one place. They circle the ruins but do not yet enter. How many? At least a dozen that I could detect. There may be more beyond my sight. A dozen Shadow Stalkers was unprecedented. Kara had never encountered more than 2 or 3 together. Something's drawing them here, she said, gathering her materials. Maybe they sense what we're trying to do. Or they are drawn to the power of this place as the Great Dark approaches, Vrax suggested. The temple may be built on a crossing point between worlds. A dimensional weak point? That would explain why the protective circle was built here specifically. She finished packing her transcriptions. I have what we need. Now we just need to get out of here alive and back to your tribe. That will not be simple, Vrax said, gesturing toward the entrance. Kara moved to his side and peered out into the darkness. What she saw made her blood run cold. The ruins were surrounded by shifting, translucent forms that distorted the night around them. The Shadow Stalkers had completely encircled the temple, their massive bodies undulating as they paced the perimeter. Unlike normal predatory behavior, they weren't attempting to enter or to flush out their prey. They were waiting. This isn't hunting behavior, Kara whispered. It's almost like they're guarding the place. Or containing us until their numbers grow stronger, Vrax replied. Kara studied the situation, her mind racing through possible escape routes. The temple had only one ground-level entrance, but the partially collapsed dome offered potential access to the roof. Up, she decided, pointing to where part of the interior wall had crumbled, creating a possible climbing route. If we can reach the roof, we might be able to move to the edge of the ruins via the tops of the other buildings. Vrax assessed the proposed route. The stone appears stable enough to hold our weight, but once on the roof, we will be exposed. Less exposed than trying to run the gauntlet down here, Kara countered. The Stalkers seem fixated on the ground-level entrances. Vrax nodded. You go first. Your weight is less, and you can test the stability. Kara began the climb. The ancient stones were worn smooth in places, making handholds difficult to find, but the deterioration provided enough irregularities for her to make progress. She reached a ledge about halfway up and paused to ensure Vrax was following. The Tazari hunter was surprisingly agile despite his bulkier form, using his four-jointed arms to grip stones that Kara couldn't have utilized. They reached the damaged section of the dome and carefully made their way onto the exterior of the roof. The stone here was slick with a moss-like growth, requiring careful placement of each foot. "There," Kara whispered, pointing to a nearby structure whose roof nearly touched that of the temple. "If we can make it across to that building, we can work our way to the edge of the complex." Vrax studied the gap. "It is narrow enough to jump. I will go first. My longer reach can aid you if you fall short." Before Kara could protest, the Tazari launched himself across the gap with surprising grace. He landed securely on the adjacent roof and turned to signal her. Kara took a deep breath, gauged the distance, and followed his example. Her jump was less powerful but sufficient to clear the gap. Vrax's strong hands grasped her arms as she landed, steadying here. They continued this way, moving from roof to roof where possible, always keeping low and moving silently. The Shadow Stalkers remained focused on the temple, apparently unaware of their quarry's elevated escape route. They had nearly reached the edge of the ruins when a section of ancient stonework crumbled beneath Kara's weight. She felt the sickening sensation of falling, a short cry escaping her lips before she could suppress it. Vrax's reflexes saved her from a complete fall. One of his hands shot out to grasp her wrist, but the damage was done. Below, the Shadow Stalkers went suddenly still, their undulating movements ceasing in perfect unison. Then, as though directed by a single mind, they all turned toward the source of the sound. "Run!" Vrax hissed, pulling Kara up with one powerful motion. They abandoned stealth for speed, racing across the final rooftop and leaping to the ground at the edge of the ruins. The forest lay just 20 meters away, not far enough to escape, but perhaps enough to find a defensible position. Behind them, the Shadow Stalkers flowed over and around the ancient buildings with terrifying speed, their forms seeming to stretch and compress as they moved in ways that defied normal physics. Kara and Vrax sprinted for the tree line. She reached for her bow as they ran, knowing conventional weapons had little effect on the creatures. As they reached the first trees, Vrax suddenly pushed her roughly to one side. She stumbled and fell just as something massive swept through the space where she had been running. One of the stalkers had gotten ahead of them somehow, cutting off their escape route. Kara rolled to her feet, arrow still knocked, and loosed it at the shadowy form. The arrow passed through the creature with no apparent effect. Vrax had drawn his stone knife, backing toward Kara as three more stalkers approached from different directions. They were surrounded, cut off from escape. "The fire," Vrax said urgently. The glyphs showed fire keeping them at bay. Kara fumbled for her fire starter and the remaining fungal material in her pouch. Her hands shook as she attempted to create a spark, aware of the stalkers closing in with each passing second. The spark caught, and the blue flame flared to life. The nearest stalker hesitated, its translucent form rippling as though affected by a strong wind. "It's working," Kara breathed. "They don't like the fire." "A temporary deterrent, at best," Vrax replied grimly. "The flame is too small to hold them all back for long." He was right. Already the stalkers were adjusting, circling just beyond the radius of the fire's light, seeking an angle of approach that would avoid the flames. "The symbols," she said suddenly. "Maybe it's not just the stones, but the symbols themselves that have power." She thrust the flaming fungus into Vrax's hand and retrieved the charcoal rubbings, dropping to her knees and using the charcoal to draw directly on the forest floor. She sketched the symbols as accurately as possible, working outward to create a protective ring. Vrax moved around her in a defensive circle, waving the fire to keep the stalkers at bay. They hissed and rippled when the flames approached, but continued testing for weaknesses. As she worked on the seventh symbol, one of the stalkers lunged forward despite the fire, its amorphous limbs stretching toward Vrax. The Tazari warrior slashed at it with his stone knife, which passed through the creature's form without resistance. But the distraction allowed another stalker to approach from behind. Kara saw the attack coming and shouted a warning. Vrax spun, but too late. The stalker's limb caught him across the chest. sending him flying into a tree trunk with bone-crushing force. The flaming fungus fell from his hand, landing perilously close to Kara's incomplete circle of symbols. She grabbed the burning material before it could be extinguished, holding it aloft with one hand while frantically completing the circle with the other. The stalkers converged now, no longer held at bay by Vrax's defensive movements. Kara completed the final symbol just as the nearest stalker reached the edge of her makeshift circle. She held her breath, expecting to feel the creature's cold touch at any moment. Instead, the stalker recoiled as though it had encountered an invisible barrier. The other creatures hesitated, their fluid forms rippling with what might have been confusion. The charcoal symbols on the forest floor began to emit a faint luminescence of their own. Not the blue-green of the native bioluminescent organisms, but a deep, pulsing purple that intensified with each passing second. "It's working," Kara gasped, hardly daring to believe it. She scrambled to Vrax's side, relieved to find him breathing but unconscious. The shadow stalkers circled the glowing perimeter, occasionally testing it only to recoil when they encountered the invisible barrier. The protective circle was holding, but for how long, Kara couldn't guess. As dawn approached, the stalkers gradually retreated, slipping away into the deeper shadows of the forest. Vrax regained consciousness as the first lavender light filtered through the canopy. "We live," he observed hoarsely. "For now," Kara confirmed. "The symbols worked, though I don't know for how long. Can you move?" Vrax tested his limbs. With difficulty, nothing is permanently damaged. "We need to get back to your tribe," Kara said, helping him to sit up. "We have the knowledge now to create a proper protection circle before the Great Dark begins, but we'll need more hands and the right materials." The journey back to the Tizari settlement took most of the day. By late afternoon, they reached the foothills where Vrax's tribe had established their temporary settlement. The high caves were a series of natural caverns in the mountainside, connected by narrow paths difficult for large stalkers to navigate. As they entered the cave system, Kara felt dozens of multifaceted eyes watching at her. Tizari of various ages observed her with expressions from curiosity to hostility. Children's smaller versions with less developed limbs were hurried away by protective parents. Vrax led her to a large central cavern where a group of elder Tizari sat in a semicircle around a fire pit. They wore elaborate decorations of bone and stone, and their blue skin was heavily marked with ritual scarring. "The Council of Elders," Vrax explained quietly. One of the elders, distinguished by a headdress of iridescent feathers, rose as they approached. "Vrax, son of Krell," he intoned, his voice deeper than any Tizari Kara had heard. "You return wounded, and in the company of the Sky Visitor, we ordered you to eliminate. Explain yourself." Vrax straightened despite his injuries. "Honored Shaman Draz, I bring knowledge vital to our survival during the coming Great Dark. The human Kara has discovered the truth of our ancient past, a truth your council has hidden from our people for generations." Murmurs rippled through the assembled Tizari. The elder narrowed his eyes, his third eyelid flickering rapidly. "You dare accuse the Council of deception?" he hissed. "I dare speak truth," Vrax replied firmly. "I have seen the forbidden carvings in the Great Temple. They show our ancestors fighting alongside humans against the Shadow Stalkers during previous cycles of the Great Dark. They reveal methods of protection that we have abandoned or forgotten." Another elder spoke up, her voice raspy with age. "The temple is forbidden for good reason, young hunter. Its influence corrupts the mind and fills it with false visions." "Not false," Kara interjected, stepping forward. The elders recoiled slightly at her boldness. "I've spent months studying the ruins, translating the glyphs. They tell a consistent story, one that matches with observable facts about the Shadow Stalkers and their behavior patterns." "The Sky Visitor speaks our tongue," Draz observed, surprise evident in his tone. "I learned quickly," Kara replied in Tizara, though she switched back to her own language. "And what I've learned is that your people and mine have encountered each other before, thousands of years ago. We fought together against the Shadow Stalkers during a particularly dangerous Great Dark cycle, one that sounds very similar to what's coming now." She reached into her pack and withdrew the charcoal rubbings, carefully spreading them on the stone floor before the council. "These symbols, arranged in a specific pattern, create a barrier that the stalkers cannot cross. We tested a crude version last night when we were surrounded by more stalkers than I've ever seen in one place. It worked, but it won't be enough for what's coming. Draz studied the rubbings, his expression unreadable. These are indeed the ancient protection runes, but they require specific materials and preparations to function properly. Stone carved from the sacred quarry, marked with pigments made from the blood of our people, mixed with minerals found only in the deepest caves. Then we need to start preparing immediately, Kara urged. The alignment begins in 2 days. Why should we trust you, Sky Visitor? Another elder demanded. Your kind brought destruction before. The ancient texts speak of this. The texts have been selectively interpreted, Vrax said carefully. The carvings in the temple show 2 types of Sky Visitors, those who fought alongside us and those who came before them, who brought the Shadow Stalkers with them, perhaps unintentionally. The council conferred among themselves in rapid Tazaroi that was too complex for Kara to follow. Finally, Draz addressed them again. The young hunter Vrax has earned the right to be heard, and the Sky Visitor has shown unusual respect for our ways by learning our language and customs, and by sparing our hunters when she could have killed them. He rose to his full height, towering over both Kara and Vrax. We will consult the sacred texts in their entirety, not just the passages traditionally shared with the tribe. If what you claim is true, preparations will begin immediately for the ritual of protection. Relief flooded through Kara. It wasn't complete acceptance, but it was a start. Thank you, honored shaman, she said, bowing her head in the Tazari gesture of respect. Do not thank me yet, Sky Visitor, Draz replied ominously. If the texts confirm your claims, the ritual will require sacrifice. Are you prepared for what that might mean? Kara met his gaze steadily. I've survived 11 months on this moon by adapting to its demands. Whatever the ritual requires, I'll face it. The expedition departed at first light, 20 of the tribe's strongest hunters led by Vrax, along with 5 craft workers carrying the materials needed for the ritual, and Kara. Each carried a torch made from a resinous wood that burned with intense heat and light, known to be particularly effective at deterring the shadow stalkers. By late afternoon, they had reached the outer perimeter of stalker territory. As dusk approached, they caught their first glimpse of the ruins through the trees. The ancient structures stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. No stalkers visible, reported one of the scouts, returning from a closer inspection. But signs of heavy presence all around the temple. They may be inside, Vrax suggested, or simply hiding, waiting for full darkness. We can't wait to find out, Kara said decisively. We need to secure the temple now, while we still have some light to work with. The Tazari hunters formed a protective circle around the craft workers, with Vrax and Kara taking the lead. They advanced toward the ruins with weapons drawn and torches held high. As they entered the clearing surrounding the ancient structures, Kara felt a familiar prickling sensation on the back of her neck. Be ready, she warned softly. They're here. They had nearly reached the steps of the temple when the attack came. Shadow stalkers materialized from every direction, flowing out from behind pillars, seeming to condense from the very air itself. At least 20 of the creatures, more than Kara had ever seen in one place, converged on the expedition. Form the circle, Vrax! Oh! Vrax shouted. The hunters immediately tightened their formation around the craft workers, facing outward with torches extended. The stalkers hesitated momentarily, repelled by the flames, but their numbers gave them confidence. One lunged forward, testing the defenses. A Tazari hunter thrust his torch directly at the creature, which recoiled with a hissing sound that Kara felt more than heard, a vibration that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her skull. To the temple, Kara urged. We can secure it more easily than holding position here. The group began to move toward the temple steps, maintaining their protective formation. The stalkers circled and probed, occasionally darting in for quick attacks before retreating from the flames. 2 Tazari hunters fell to these swift assaults, their bodies dragged away into the gathering darkness. They reached the temple entrance and began to file inside, maintaining the defensive circle as best they could. The interior was dark, but thankfully empty of stalkers. The creatures seemed reluctant to enter the ancient structure, hovering at the threshold but not crossing it. They fear this place, one of the craft workers observed. Or they're waiting for something, Kara replied grimly. We need to work quickly. The alignment begins tomorrow at dusk. Vrax organized the hunters into guard rotations while the craft workers began unpacking their materials. They had brought pre-carved stones from the sacred quarry, each inscribed with one of the protection symbols. These needed to be arranged in a precise pattern within the central chamber of the temple, then activated through the blood ritual at the exact moment of alignment. Kara worked alongside the craft workers, using her knowledge of the glyphs to ensure each stone was positioned correctly. Throughout the night, the Shadow Stalkers maintained their vigil outside the temple. Occasionally, one would test the entrance, only to retreat when confronted with torches. But they did not disperse, and their numbers seemed to grow as the hours passed. By dawn, the protective circle was nearly complete. The carved stones formed a perfect ring around the central altar of the temple, each symbol aligned with astronomical markers built into the structure's architecture. As morning light filtered through the damaged dome, Kara stepped back to observe their work. The circle of stones seemed to pulse with a subtle energy that made the air around it shimmer slightly. It's ready, she announced. Now we wait for the alignment. Vrax joined her, his expression solemn. The stalkers have not dispersed with the daylight. They grow bolder. The barrier's already weakening, Kara surmised. The alignment must be affecting them even before it reaches its peak. As dusk approached, tension mounted within the temple. The shadow stalkers outside had grown increasingly agitated, their translucent forms rippling and pulsing as they circled the structure. They had begun making coordinated rushes at the entrance, testing the defenders' resolve. Through gaps in the temple roof, Kara could see the dual moons moving steadily toward alignment. The larger moon was already partially eclipsing the smaller one, creating an eerie twilight. It is time to prepare for the ritual, announced the eldest of the craft workers, a female Tazari named Shrell. The blood givers must be purified. Kara and Vrax were led to a small alcove where Shrell had prepared a basin of clear water infused with aromatic herbs. The purification ritual was simple but solemn. They washed their hands and faces in the fragrant water while Shrell recited ancient phrases. When this was complete, they were each given ceremonial garments, simple robes made from a lightweight, silky material. Hers was a deep indigo color, while Vrax's was a rich crimson. The colors represent your worlds, Shrell explained. Blue for Earth with its vast oceans, red for Proxima with its mineral-rich soil. As they returned to the central chamber, a commotion erupted at the temple entrance. The Shadow Stalkers had begun a more determined assault, overwhelming the defensive position. 2 more Tazari hunters fell as the creatures breached the barricade. Hold them back, Vrax commanded, rushing to join the defense. We need only a little more time. Kara helped the craft workers make final adjustments to the stone circle as the sounds of battle echoed through the temple. The Shadow Stalkers were different now, more solid somehow, less translucent, and seemingly less affected by the torches. The alignment was strengthening them. We must begin the ritual now, Shrell urged, her voice tense. The barrier weakens with each passing moment. Kara looked to the roof opening, where the moons were visible, now nearly perfectly aligned. It's almost time. Vrax fought his way back to them, his stone knife dripping with a strange silvery substance, the closest thing to blood that the Shadow Stalkers possessed. They are inside the temple, he reported grimly. Our hunters cannot hold them much longer. Then we do this now, Kara decided. She and Vrax took their positions on opposite sides of the stone circle. Shrell handed each of them a ceremonial blade, beautiful implements carved from a crystalline material that caught and reflected the torchlight. When the moons align perfectly, you must each make the offering, Shrell instructed. A palm cut deep enough to flow freely, but not so deep as to cause lasting damage. The blood must drip simultaneously onto the keystone. She indicated a central stone inscribed with both human and Tazari symbols. The sounds of fighting grew closer. Kara could see shadow stalkers moving through the peripheral chambers of the temple, their forms more defined than she had ever seen them, less like living distortions and more like solid creatures with distinct anatomies. Now, Shrell cried as the moons achieved perfect alignment, visible through the temple dome. Kara and Vrax locked eyes across the circle, then drew their blades across their palms in unison. Kara felt the sharp sting of the cut, followed by the warm flow of blood. They extended their hands over the keystone, allowing their blood to mingle and drip onto the ancient symbols. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the keystone began to glow with the same purple luminescence that Kara had seen in her improvised protection circle. The light spread rapidly to the other stones, flowing along the inscribed symbols until the entire circle pulsed with energy. The shadow stalkers that had entered the temple froze, their forms shuddering as though caught in a powerful current. The light from the stone circle intensified, beams shooting upward to converge at the opening in the dome, precisely where the aligned moons were visible. A resonant humming filled the air, growing in volume until it was almost painful. Kara felt the vibration in her bones, in her blood, a sensation both exhilarating and terrifying. The shadow stalkers began to distort, their now solid forms stretching and thinning, as though being pulled apart by some invisible force. They emitted that bone-chilling hiss that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the mind. But now it sounded like a scream. The light from the stone circle expanded outward in a shockwave, passing through the temple walls and beyond. Through the entrance, Kara could see it spreading across the ruins and into the forest, illuminating every shadow stalker in its path. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light contracted, pulling back toward the circle with tremendous force. It dragged the shadow stalkers with it, their forms compressing and dissolving as they were drawn inexorably toward the keystone. A final blinding flash of purple light erupted from the circle, shooting upward through the dome opening and into the aligned moons. For an instant, the entire sky seemed to ripple, as though reality itself was being recalibrated. Then stillness, silence. Kara blinked away the after images, trying to make sense of what had happened. The temple was empty of shadow stalkers. The stone circle had ceased its glowing, though the symbols remained permanently changed. What had been carved depressions were now filled with a solid, crystalline substance formed from the mingled blood of human and Tazari. "It's done," Shrell whispered, awe evident in her voice. "The barrier is restored." Vrax moved to Kara's side, bandaging his own cut palm before taking her hand to tend to her wound. "You have saved our world, Earthborn." "We saved it together," Kara corrected him, wincing slightly as he applied a healing paste to her cut. "Just as our ancestors did before us." The surviving Tazari hunters approached cautiously, disbelief evident in their expressions as they surveyed the now empty temple. "The shadow stalkers?" one asked. "Returned to their own dimension," Shrell explained. "The ritual didn't destroy them. It repaired the barrier between our worlds, sealing the breach that allowed them to cross over." "Will they return?" another hunter questioned. "Eventually," Kara said, recalling what she had learned from the carvings and sacred text. "The dimensional barrier naturally thins during certain astronomical alignments, but it won't be as severe next time, and now your people know how to prepare." Vrax finished bandaging her hand and stepped back. "And what of you, Kara of Earth? Your knowledge was instrumental in this victory. Will you share it with your people when they come?" Kara looked up at the dual moons, now moving out of alignment. "Yes," she said firmly. "My people need to understand what happened here, both now and thousands of years ago. We need to remember that some boundaries should be respected and that some alliances transcend worlds." As dawn broke over Proxima's moon, the expedition began its journey back to the Tazari settlement. Kara walked alongside Vrax, their bandaged hands a testament to the blood they had shared in defense of this world. She thought about the transmission she had managed to send before her equipment was destroyed, about the possibility of rescue, about returning to Earth with knowledge that would change humanity's understanding of dimensional physics and ancient interspecies contact. But for now, she was content to have found her place in this alien world, not as an intruder or a victim, but as an ally. She had adapted, survived, and ultimately thrived in the harshest environment she had ever faced, proving the resilience that defined her species. And in doing so, she had forged a connection that spanned not just worlds, but dimensions, a bond of shared struggle and sacrifice that neither time nor distance could sever. As they crested a hill and the Tazari settlement came into view, with its cave entrances now marked with protective symbols from the ancient ritual, Kara felt something she hadn't experienced since the crash 11 months ago. a sense of coming home.